It's 1930, and Max Beckmann is the biggest artist in Germany. A painter, a printer, a pugnacious pugilist of art, playing for keeps at the easel or the bar with a cocktail and cigarette. The ultimate übermensch, conceived by Nietzsche, the philosopher who said, "God is dead, long live the Superman."
And really felt that artists should be powerful and talked about pushing their competition to the wall and that kind of thing. And Beckmann sort of lives that.
Tom Rascher, a curator of European art at the Minneapolis Institute of Art, has organized a show of German art from the early 20th century, now on view at the museum, which includes a number of Beckmann pictures. These vast canvases of partiers at the end of the world, mythological figures of his own invention and himself, over and over throughout his life. Maybe the most prolific painter of self-portraits next to Rembrandt. Beckmann is always faithful to the Weltanschauung, the classic Germanic worldview of brooding darkness and deep intellectualism. Creativity as a gateway into the Innerlichkeit, the inner self. As Beckmann puts it, prior to existence, a soul yearns to become a self. It is this self that I seek in life as in art.
Beckmann felt that we are all God, and he brings that to his own work by creating palpable physical scenes on his canvases. And he's very interested in that intense physicality as opposed to superficial lighting. And he really wants to have his canvases deliver an incredible impact to the viewer.
He is, in one word, a critic says of Beckmann, a German painter. And Germans love him. He is showered with honors and prizes, shows in the top galleries, a teaching job in a top school. But as the years go by, and the Nazi Party becomes more and more powerful, some Germans start to see him differently. A Nazi writer calls his work nothing but fakement, grimace, intellectualism. Another calls it base obscenity. In 1933, when Hitler takes over as chancellor, Beckmann's shows are canceled. He loses his job. By 1937, more than 500 of his works have been pulled from German museums and galleries.
When the Nazis started confiscating works from museums, the biggest pile of work that they took away was work by Beckmann. And in part, that's because there were so many works on paper, frankly, because he made a lot of drawings and prints, watercolors and whatnot, but also a lot of paintings. He was a very, very productive artist.
On July 18, 1937, the Nazis opened their so-called degenerate art exhibition in Munich, meant to ridicule modern abstract and other art they don't like, calling it insulting to German feeling. And 10 of Beckmann's works are in the show. That night, Max Beckmann and his wife pack a couple of bags, and the next day, they're gone. This is the Object Podcast, produced by the Minneapolis Institute of Art. The Object is made possible by generous support from Ameriprise Financial, a proud supporter of the Minneapolis Institute of Art and committed to the future of art and culture in the communities they serve. Ameriprise Financial, helping people feel confident about their financial future since 1894. This is the second episode of Season 8, with more to come all year long, at least 2 episodes every month. And before we get back to the story, I want to introduce you to another museum podcast, Recurrent, from the Getty, a narrative podcast like this one, hosted by Jaime Roque, and now in its second season, all about keeping the past present. What I really like about it, of course, is how objects become stories about people. like a lost Thelonious Monk concert booked by a teenager at his high school in 1968 that becomes a totem of joyous resistance. They're bringing the museum into the streets, and honestly, the production is so good. I listen, and I want to hang it up. No, it makes me better, and I'm so glad we're all talking about the secret life of objects. Give it a listen wherever you get your podcasts. And now, on with our story. I'm Tim Gihring. Max Beckmann is a natural. Growing up in Berlin, he knows he's an artist the way other people know they're a lawyer or a doctor, and is accepted to the Weimar Academy at age 16. Wins a prize at 20 that pays for half a year in Florence. There in Italy, he paints one of his first self-portraits, a cocky dandy scowling at the world, a cigarette naturally dangling from his right hand. He calls his first major work in 1905, Young Men by the Sea, a group of naked dudes deep in thought at the beach, one playing the flute, stripped to their Innerlichkeit. They are artists, or maybe Greek gods chillaxing. Who knows? Not even Beckmann. When the war breaks out in 1914, Beckmann volunteers and ends up an ambulance driver in Belgium. Within a year, he's having a nervous breakdown. Somehow he makes it through 2 more years before he's finally discharged in 1917. Beckmann is never the same, and neither is his art.
His work after his exposure to death, to war, to violence, to destruction, to despair, changes remarkably. And what we think of as the Beckmann style that is so important and so vital in the 20s and 30s comes from there.
He still loves humanity, he says in the, quote, creative credo that he writes in 1918. He loves it despite all its meanness, its banality, its dullness, its cheap contentment, its oh-so-very rare heroism. He loves humanity so much, he says, that he wants to be part of all the, quote, misery that is coming. His art becomes more angular, his colors more subdued. There are no more naked men at the beach. The stronger my determination grows to grasp the unutterable things of this world, he says, the harder I try to capture the terrible, thrilling monster of life's vitality, and to confine it, to beat it down, and to strangle it with crystal clear, razor-sharp lines and planes. Even his self-portraits become darker. There he is in Belgium, baring his teeth in anger. There he is at a Frankfurt nightclub, the cynical boulevardier, sipping a glass of Riesling. Eventually, he depicts himself as a morbid clown.
Basically, he spent the rest of his life interrogating God, saying, what is going on here? If there is a God and a just God, how can he allow these things to happen?
Mostly after the war, Beckmann craves his freedom. He has always been a fan of Nietzsche, and now he takes the Superman concept to heart. The idea that you should be your own man, your own mensch, and never mind the others. By the 1920s in Germany, there are the expressionist artists who paint what they feel, and the new objectivity artists who paint what they see. Beckmann is all of them and none of them.
Well, Beckmann didn't want to be a part of these things. He really resisted labels. He just wanted to be something separate and apart. Through reading Nietzsche, Beckmann discovered that he should become a moral leader in society. And he took that role very seriously.
Beckmann paints very thinly, such an austere technique that you can see the hairs of the brush in his strokes. There's nothing rich or fanciful about it. For him, it is the idea that matters.
One of the advantages that it had for him was that he loved the color black. And his matte surfaces absorbed light like nobody else. And so they created an intensity and a mystery that perhaps was a step beyond what his peers were doing.
Art resolves through form, the many paradoxes of life, he says, and sometimes permits us to glimpse behind the dark curtain which hides the spaces unknown. Yeah.
In Beckmann, everything is metaphorical. You can say it about the color, you can say it about the subjects, you can say it about the forms, the compositions, everything. It's not a metaphor that's easy to untangle because he wanted his works to be mysterious. He wanted them to be other worlds.
Tom says you can look at Beckmann's paintings of people swimming in Italy like broken bodies, wrapped in strange towels and swim caps, of a flooded cafe where a man with severed arms hangs from the ceiling. You can look at these like the curious old paintings of Peter Bruegel from the late Renaissance, of hunters in the snow returning to a happy town with nothing to show for it, of Icarus falling from the sky when everyone is too busy to notice. Little worlds turned upside down.
You often have things that don't make a lot of sense, or things that seem familiar but strange because they may be in a different context, or you may be mixing things together that aren't normally seen together. And for Beckmann, life was a great big puzzle. He couldn't understand how the world could be really as cruel and as violent as it was. And he found that people were subjected to this world and were trying to find their way through it.
Weimar Germany in the 1920s loves this kind of thing. Beckmann's work, critics say, brings order to a depraved world, even if that means depicting depraved people. Sometimes he resembles a garbage disposal worker, one critic says. But what the devil? The future is his. Beckmann is enjoying his freedom and his fame, going to nightclubs in a tuxedo. In his most famous self-portrait, painted in Frankfurt in 1927, he stands before a window in a tux, looking aloof, almost scornful. White light pouring onto his head of close-cropped hair, so that it appears, as one critic noted, like a moonlit skull. He is the übermensch, telling people that no one is coming to save them but themselves. We have nothing more to expect from the outside, only from ourselves, he says in 1927, for we are God. Hitler is an artist. Maybe you know this. He applies to the Academy of Fine Arts in Vienna twice, in 1907 and 1908, when Beckmann is already living the artist life at the Villa Romana in Florence on scholarship. Hitler is rejected both times. But he never stops thinking about art. Not when he's serving 9 months in prison after his failed coup in 1923, and certainly not once he does come to power. Art is a way to instill his ideals, he thinks, what it means to be German, which in his mind means becoming the world-conquering superior beings that Germans have always been destined to be. Hitler's favorite artist is a guy named Adolf Ziegler, who paints flowers and female nudes, like the triptych Hitler puts above his mantle of 4 fair-haired naked women representing earth, fire, soil, and air. In some circles, Ziegler is called the Meister des Deutschen Schamhaare, the master of German pubic hair. He is also the guy the Nazis asked to purge so-called degenerate artists from German museums. Artists like Beckmann.
Hitler is somebody who wants everybody to fall into line, and Beckmann's a guy who's not going to fall into line for anybody. And his work, even though it's heroic in scale, it is not heroic in the mindset of the kinds of heroes that Hitler's got in mind. It's not about military heroism, and it's not about government-sanctioned heroism. It's about the heroic qualities of an individual facing a chaotic world. Hitler knows that if he's going to commission anything from Beckmann, it's not going to come out how he wants it. And Beckmann is just one huge loose cannon, and he wanted him gone.
In the winter of 1933, when Hitler becomes Chancellor of Germany, Beckmann is staging a big show in a small town. But before it opens, the museum is locked. Strips of red paper are pasted across the advertising posters, which say postponed. Though, of course, it never opens. Beckmann loses his job, and soon hundreds more of his works are taken from museums. The Jewish art dealers who had turned the German art scene into Europe's most dynamic are starting to leave, along with the writers, the film directors, and the artists themselves. Except for Beckmann. Beckmann paints and waits. The Superman who can't quite seem to save himself. When the Degenerate Art Exhibition opens in July 1937 in Munich, Hitler gives a speech. He is also opening a new museum, full of art acceptable to him, pretty much right across the street. And so we ask, what does being German mean? It is to be clear-minded, he says, to be logical, which has nothing to do with inner experience or empathy or sentiment. Certainly nothing to do with Impressionism or Cubism or Dadaism or Futurism. These stupid, mendacious excuses, Hitler says, for creations that are inherently worthless. Such artworks will no longer find their way to the German people. For let no one deceive himself, National Socialism has given itself the task of freeing the German Reich, and thus our people and their life, from all those influences that are pernicious to our existence. And even if this purification cannot happen in a single day, every person or thing that is participating in this perversion should realize that the hour of his elimination will come sooner or later. The next morning, Beckmann and his wife are on a train to Amsterdam. They have packed only summer clothes, assuming perhaps that this would all blow over, that Hitler wouldn't do half the Hitler things he talks about. But he does, right? Hitler being Hitler, he takes Austria and then Czechoslovakia, and in 1939 he invades Poland, and soon World War II is in full swing. By 1940, the Netherlands, too, are occupied by the Nazis. And it's as if Beckmann had never left Germany. Beckmann never does return. At all. In Amsterdam, the Beckmanns find a tall, narrow house, 3 windows wide. A Dutch couple lives on the first floor. The Beckmanns move into the second and set up a studio on the third. The studio is a former warehouse for tobacco, which seems to suit Beckmann just fine. There is 1 window and a skylight overhead. He puts in a table, 2 easels, and an easy chair. And always, wherever he is, there's a Pekingese dog. If Beckmann is not an easy person to know, he is even less so in exile. George Gross, a fellow painter from Berlin who moves away to New York, calls him a kind of hermit, the Hermann Hesse painting, German and heavy, unapproachable, with the personality of a paperweight. A friend describes his massive head like one of those rocks left by a prehistoric glacier on top of a hill. Atop this erratic boulder is often a little black derby. Once in Paris, Beckmann pushed his hat down and turned a few cartwheels without losing it. "You should learn this too," he told his friend. "Very important." Beckmann's idea of a good night out is to dress up, stand at the bar of a nice hotel, and do nothing. Just look out over the rim of his champagne glass.
He's not really putting his emotions and his thoughts out there immediately for you to see. He looks at you impassively. And you can see that there's a lot going on in there, but you're not quite sure what it is. And then you turn and look at the walls around you, and you see all these crazy images that he's painted. And that's what's going on in his head. And he lets all of that out and puts it on canvas for us to see. And it's he's got that sort of egg-shaped head, and this thing busts open, and there is incredible life inside.
In Amsterdam, he mostly stays in his studio and smokes. He makes very few paintings of the city itself. Instead, he focuses on the Innerlichkeit. A self-portrait called Released shows him ironically in chains. On his left shoulder is the word America, where he hopes eventually to go. He writes to an art dealer back in Germany, "If you ever have the chance, please don't forget to teach the Nazis that I am a German painter." Well, soon enough, Beckmann pulls himself together and begins to work. In fact, he makes some of his best work in Amsterdam during the war by candlelight.
I think that his art became one way of working things out. It's almost like having a psychologist or a psychiatrist analyze somebody's dreams, because Beckmann created dreams on canvas and paper, nightmares often, but he was just taking these images that were in his head and putting them out there, and perhaps there was a cathartic effect for him. I don't really know.
He begins a series of 5 triptychs of the sort you might see over an altar in church, perhaps as an ironic answer to Adolf Ziegler's triptych hanging in Hitler's home, though more likely as a challenge to faith itself. One of the triptychs, now at the Minneapolis Institute of Art, he calls Blind Man's Buff, after the parlor game of wandering around a room blindfolded. Indeed, it seems to be a party scene in 3 rooms, one with a harpist, a flutist, a drummer, a clock with no real beginning or end, as if we've been dropped into chaos. Another with a blindfolded man feeling about in the dark.
And I think that's what Beckmann was feeling about the world at the time, that we'd all been put into a situation where we didn't know what was going on, which is the antithesis of a message that brings you one way. And salvation, the things that one typically expects to find in a central religious image. His subjects are not models of behavior. They are people who are stuck in the same chaotic quandary that we find ourselves in, or that everybody finds themselves in a world that seems unjust. It's about questioning how you move forward. Where do we go? What do we do? How do we make sense of anything?
The war ends in 1945, and 2 years later, Beckmann finally does come to America. He's been offered a job at Washington University in St. Louis, with some prodding from the director of the St. Louis Art Museum. St. Louis is no Berlin, even if there is a lot of German heritage, newspapers, radio stations, all in German. But Berlin is rubble. And in St. Louis, Beckmann becomes a magnet for the intellectual and social life of the city. His wife, Quappy, helping translate. Their latest Pekingese, Butchie, in her arms. A patron buys dozens of his works and donates them to the St. Louis Art Museum, a complete history of his life in art.
In America, he became a celebrated figure. And again, shall we say, and he wound up with the accolades that he may have dreamt of having as a young man in Berlin.
Beckmann stays 2 years and then is offered a job at the Brooklyn Museum, teaching in its art school. It's 1949. The art world has almost completely turned away from work like his. With its enigmatic figures and deep dark commentary, abstraction is everything. Beckmann calls abstraction nail polish, a way of avoiding reality. He paces the classroom like a sad bulldog, growling the few English words he knows, his head hanging low now, dark shadows under his eyes, a cigarette in the 3 teeth he has left in the middle of his mouth. Quappy stands to the side, holding the dog, ready to translate. One of his students, an older woman who knows nothing of Beckmann, proudly shows him her painting of a house, pretty with a rose-entwined fence around it. Beckmann says nothing, squirts a wad of black onto the palette, and with the biggest brush he can find, wipes it across the house. More black, he says, and leaves.
Beckmann was an interesting figure in the New York art world in the late 1940s and into 1950, the year of his death, partly because he was a relic from the past. And so here he is conducting classes for a bunch of students who want to be abstract expressionists and be hip and with it. And Beckmann is telling them to stick to the figure, and be rigorous, have structure.
Other students come around to his style, sensing beneath the gruffness a higher ideal for art, a humanism, a human, the übermensch to the end.
What some of them said was that regardless of the fact that they were going to pursue abstraction when he felt that they should stick to figuration, they learned a lot about rigor in art and really thinking things through and taking it seriously and realizing that what you do has meaning or can have meaning, and it isn't meant to be just decoration on a canvas.
Christmas, 1950. Beckmann is finishing his latest triptych in his apartment on the Upper West Side of Manhattan. On the night of December 26, he lays on some last touches and begins to sweat. He comes to bed telling Quappy, "I feel like a squeezed-out lemon." By the morning, he is feeling better and decides to walk to the Metropolitan Museum of Art to see his latest self-portrait in a show of new American art. An image of himself in an orange shirt and blue blazer, smoking. He walks out the door, and 9 blocks later, falls over and dies. A heart attack at 66. A few days later, a friend from Germany receives a letter from Beckmann, written on Christmas night, the last letter he ever wrote. "I'm pretty well squeezed out," it says. But Beckmann still manages to critique the friend's book and a play he had recently seen, The Lady Is Not for Burning. He liked the play, the language, the philosophy. "It's great art," he writes, except for the, quote, "glued-on happy ending."
There we go.
This has been the Object Podcast, the second episode of Season 8, with new episodes to come every month for the rest of the year. Made possible by the generous support of Ameriprise Financial. Leave us a review, please, wherever you listen. It's really helpful for us to see. And do subscribe wherever you listen so you never miss an episode. And thanks very much for listening.